Home ownership rates crash. Let's have a look. Hello everyone, Florian here and welcome to another episode of HeiseSays. Grab your stein of coffee and we're going to go through this article discussing the fall in home ownership rates, particularly among younger Australians. And it's a concerning trend because you want people to own homes, you want people to establish families, you want people to have stability and certainty. And if you have less people with those things, well, you also have a shift away from conservative politics, and the risk is that we can go careening to more radical forms of ideological leadership, which is a little worrying, and frankly, I think where we're headed. So, home ownership rates drop for young first home buyers. The home ownership rate of millennial first home buyers has declined over the last few decades, research has found. The research revealed that home buyers born in 1980s, the best generation, that's it, go millennials, are achieving home ownership significantly less than first home buyers born in the preceding decades, with the rate of home ownership being only 75% of the rate in earlier decades after 20 years. I'd argue that's because Australia is changing, our quality of life is changing. We are not going to have the same quality of life for the same effort as previous generations. It's just the way it is. And I think a lot of it, because people can bitch and moan and say the boomers had it easy, but a lot of it is the voting patterns of the millennials are causing this. Just wait and see. Such a interventionalist, I'd say, generation. There'll be a lot of them that vote for more regulation, more costs, more rules. All of these things add to the value and cost of housing. It's not going to be cheaper. Then you've got the other generation, the not in my backyard crowd as well, although it's spanning more. It's spanning all of them. I saw one in the wild on the weekend, no trams in Palmy, and I'm going to Rachel, why would you not want mass transit along, extending along all of the Gold Coast? She said it's probably someone who's never had to take mass transit in their entire life. That was the suburb we were in. So, entitled Transitions into Home Ownership, a quantitative assessment. The research was undertaken for the Australian Housing and Urban Research Institute by the University of Sydney and RMIT University researchers to analyse the economic constraints over the last 40 years on people's ability to purchase a home. Well, here's one thing that I'd say. The fact that, as opposed to previous generations, we've had to have a significant portion of our savings locked away until we're retirement by the state. And then any push to allow people to access their superannuation as a house deposit, even if they have to pay it back later, is quashed. Previous generations didn't have that hindrance, did they? Over the last 3 decades, ownership rates for households at age 30 to 34 have declined substantially, dropping from 65% of people born in the mid to late 1950s, being homeowners of age 30 to 34 to 45% of people born in the mid to late 1980s, according to the research. So, wow, that's a big fall. That's significant. One of the authors of the research, Professor Stephen Whelan, stated the drop in the ownership rate came as house prices have nearly tripled, which indicated that rising prices and falling affordability are associated with a delay in housing market entry for Australian households. And I would also argue that there's cultural changes. You've got, now a household needs 2 people, and both of them need to work. That's the average household. And that's how you have to assess the affordability of a house. It has to be against a household. In the 50s, it would have been much rarer for both parties in a relationship to be working as opposed to now. I remember Rachel's grandmother was working when they met and continued to work, and her grandfather said, sure, you can continue to work, but you're not, any of the money you earn goes into like investment properties. It's got nothing to do with maintaining the household. He wanted to ensure that he was providing. But now, both of you need to work just to be normal. And that's part of the reason why housing is more expensive relative to individual income. When you compare it to household income, sure, it's gotten worse, but not as bad as people paint. And, I mean, you look at housing in Brisbane housing in the 50s. What utility did you get in these houses? They still had shitters outside. Okay, they didn't even have plumbing. They didn't even have stormwater collection or water from the dams. Everyone's off rainwater tanks back then. And, it wasn't like, you could find houses like that nowadays and move further out and have less amenities. So another thing we need to consider, that the houses that we're comparing to what our previous generations got have greater amenity than they had in the past, including the surrounding areas. I know my parents bought in Coldstream in Victoria, and that was because it was still a local call to Melbourne. It was a mission to drive out there. I remember I went out there with Rachel a few years ago, and we could see the cows in the fields, and she's going, "How far out did you live as a kid?" But now the Coldstream I think has gone a bit south, to be honest. The last thing I've heard, but the amenity and facilities you have, particularly in Lilydale, the next town over, they've got all these other things there now that adds value to the areas. I'm just looking in Brisbane. The closer you are to Brisbane, the more amenities, the facilities you have. That increases the value of the houses. So we've got to keep that in mind. And also, the types of houses that we look at. You know what? I'm going to bring up this PowerPoint here, and we'll look at houses in the 1950s. So hang on. Okay, let me just jump to that, guys, because I'm so organized. Okay, well, this is 60s houses over here. Hang on. Topic change. There we go. Can you see that? Let me check. Good, you can see that. So this is old A.V. Jennings houses. And here's the thing. The sizes of a spec home now, they're much bigger. They're much more luxurious. I remember as a student, I was working on a project, and it was a dentist, and his butler's pantry was bigger than the apartment I was living in. Look at these little houses. You've got, like, the Kingston there, 2 bedrooms. We'll draw on it here. You've got 2 bedrooms. Let's wait till it goes a bit bigger. You've got here, look at them. They're just little, simple homes. And you can still get these, but people don't get them anymore. Like, here we go. Look at this one. You've got a lounge room. Wait a minute. You've got a lounge room, a dining. You've got a kitchen with a laundry coming off it. And remember, this doesn't have all, you don't need to do an energy efficiency report for this house back then. That would have cost thousands of dollars. You wouldn't have all the mod cons and conveniences that are considered standard now that you can't do without. They'll force you to insulate your whole house as if you're air conditioning, even if you don't intend to. It's a legislation. It's because just in case. But that, it sounds good, but it adds to the cost. We've got to remember this when we're advocating for all of these things. You've got a little bathroom here and 3 beds. Little simple house. Here's, Popular Homes from Plantation. These are some of the Institute of Architects. They were rolling out these architecturally designed houses, little starter homes. They're more expensive than the A.V. Jennings stuff that we saw, like always, but still the plans are pretty simple. And this is what we need to remember when we're comparing historical examples of housing to what we have today. Okay, because everything's double story now, probably because it's a smaller block. You've got 4 bedrooms, a family room, a media room, a double garage. Then they've got a butler's pantry sometimes. All of these things they add to these houses. One thing I found really funny was when you calculate the cost of construction for houses, particularly luxury houses, and people are spending a fortune building storage space to store like crap from IKEA and Christmas trees and things like that. Anyway, more importantly, while this may represent in part simply a delay in younger Australians buying a home, our research shows that as these younger groups of people grow older, they are less likely to catch up and buy a home, Professor Whelan said. After 10 years, the ownership rate gap, when comparing the 1950s cohort to the 1980s, aged 40 to 44, has closed by less than half, and after 20 years, 50 to 54, the ownership rate is only around 75% of the 1950s group. Professor Wieland added that saving enough for a deposit or a down payment was a key constraint that the younger generations are facing, taking over 6 years in markets such as Sydney and Melbourne to save for a deposit on an average dwelling. And I've been contacted by viewers of the channel. They moved. They gave up on Sydney. They gave up on Melbourne. They moved to Queensland. Look at famous YouTuber Bering. He moved to Queensland. Yeah, much more affordable up here than other parts of the country. And the weather's better and the people are smarter and more attractive. And yeah. Data released by competitor site CanStar's First Home Buyer Survey found that while first home buyers have increased average monthly savings by 13% to $1,605, it still takes who cares? I don't care about single home buyers. Sorry. Okay? We're not in a world where that's feasible anymore. We're not in the 50s anymore. I know people want to go back to the 50s, where it was actually affordable to keep the missus at home. It's not going to happen. The increase in savings cut the time, 20% to just shy of 2 years for a couple. That's it. You need a couple. You need to both save a shitload. You need to go down the Dave Ramsey path. That's the only chance you have. And it's not fair. It's not going to get any easier. I mean, let's check out what I call now probably the 10 pillars of the housing market. Hang on. Is that coming up? There, yes, it is. Okay, wait. Let me move that over there. There we go. Bear with me a second while I get this sorted. And the first one is we've got fewer bad loans. Non-performing loans are down. NAB contacted thousands of people that are at risk and only 14 needed help. Now, if you're saying, of course they're going to lie to the bank, okay, but we'll see. We'll see. You've got opening the gates. Migrants are flooding back to Australia. People want to come here. They want to study here. They want to move here. They want to work here. As much as people love to bitch and moan about Australia, it's still a pretty bloody good country. Okay, even our pain in the ass politicians, their incompetence is still superior to some of the ones overseas. Look at America with their housing bloody bubble there that they generated by lending to anyone with a pulse, compared to our 2% deposit capped at 10,000 people. Okay? You've got the construction apocalypse. These are all things that I would argue are supporting the prices of the housing sector. We're going to struggle to meet supply because so many builders are going under. And while construction companies, external administrations and controller appointments dipped, went back up again. You've got government support for the housing sector, indirectly or directly. The RBA cutting the cash rate, home builder juicing the market. You've got up to 88 grand of grants you could get. 5 and 2% government loan guarantees. You've got negative gearing. That's part of our culture. That's not going to change. You can bitch and moan about it. Billy Shorty tried to get it into Parliament and he got his ass kicked. No one's going to, Labor's not going to bring negative gearing to the table if they're smart. A lot of their voters, a lot of their civil servant employees that are probably rusted on Labor are using negative gearing because lots of normal people use it, guys, because we all hate paying tax. Have you seen all these articles that are appearing now on the newspaper where people suddenly have to pay tax back for the first time in their life? And they're all pissed off. This is why we need to get rid of pay-as-you-go, or people have to pay it themselves monthly. Wouldn't that be funny? You've got the zombies kept alive. Where they change the rules as needed. They change the rules as needed, guys. You've got the NIMBY crowd. You've got councils. All of these things making it difficult to build. You got market competition. These are the 3 places where half of Australians live. So don't kid yourself. You're not going to move here. What you're going to do is you're going to fly out to the middle of nowhere, work your shift on the mine, then come back to civilization. That's what you're going to do. Okay? You got people living out, near APY land. What was it, on Minterby, and then the camp's gone, and it's all, that culture, that community there is now gone. Yeah, We're going to hug the coast. You got construction legislation changes. These NCC changes, the livability standards and other things are going to drive up the cost by 30 grand. There you go. Every house has now gotten 30 grand more expensive. And this is not the end of it. It's going to keep changing because people can make good, legitimate arguments for these interventions in the housing market, maybe to make it more livable, maybe to make it more energy efficient. But you have to understand, when you make those arguments, you are driving people out of housing. What's better, someone having a super energy efficient house that's livable for when they're 80, or buying a house 30 years before or 20 years earlier, and then retrofitting it in later years? Or retiring, being a homeowner, as opposed to being on the pension and renting. You've got AMPRA interventions. This is why we're not going to see the banks all collapse. You're not going to have the bail-ins, guys. The Citizen Party isn't going to get a flood of people joining them. It's not going to happen in Australia. But APRA will change the rules as necessary with the buffer, which the banks are already doing to allow people to refinance to ensure credit won't be choked off. So they've said it. There's another one. You've got family support. Members of the channel here, 66% said they'd step up to support a family member paying their mortgage one way or another. That's 1,200 people responding to this. That's comparable to a Finder survey. You've got the FOMO impact of all the number of houses, 10.5, or dwellings, 10.5 million in the country, 600,000 changed hands in 2021. And if we're saying, okay, 600,000 of that, 10,000 are the 2% government loans, and we'll say they're the highest, the most at risk of collapsing, then that's a tiny percentage of the total number of dwellings. And then the other one, and I have to add another slide to this, the demographic shift that's occurring in Australia now. We've got a shift away from bigger family units or household units to smaller household units, smaller sizes of households, so there's going to be more demand for housing as well. So guys, those are what I call the pillars of the housing market. We have to keep that take that into account when we're discussing all of this. So honestly, I think it's quite concerning that home ownership rates are dropping. It's going to be interesting what happens over the next few decades. You'll have a demographic who will be inheriting a lot of wealth. What are they going to do with it then? And let's just hope they don't get... My concern is you'll have a generation that is has so little to conserve. We start seeing radical political ideology and policy get up. Like there's legitimate talk about rent control now in Australia coming from the Greens at a public level. This is crazy. These things have been disproven time and time again. Yet we've got politicians publicly discussing these issues, not being mocked. Wouldn't it be funny if they vote in a death tax, and just as they're about to inherit wealth, half of it gets taken away? But we've got to do something. We have to get more people owning homes. My argument is we need to increase supply. We need to make it easier for people to build. But we've got the construction apocalypse now. So how much more can we build without overheating the market? What do you think? What would you do? Take care, guys. Thanks for watching. Like, share, subscribe. Check out HeiseBim or Heise Does for other topics I discuss. And if you're a fan of the channel and want to support us, you can on YouTube or Patreon. Use our referral links via Pocket Squares, or call me if you need an architect. Take care. Have a great day. And enjoy what's left of your weekend. Take care. I think I'll relax and play some computer games tonight to finish off the weekend. Oh, I should do some work. We'll see. We'll see.